Right, today we're going to talk about the last three chemical cycles that I mentioned a couple of days ago. We've already talked about the water cycle and the carbon dioxide cycle. Today we're going to start with the oxygen cycle, and you will see that in many ways the oxygen cycle is almost a mirror image of the carbon dioxide cycle. And so make sure that you have your three colored pencils again, and that you have your three diagrams that I told you to have. And we're going to, again, start with the one with the oxygen cycle. This particular diagram isn't quite as fancy as the other ones that you saw because I couldn't find a one that really illustrated what I wanted to illustrate, so I tried to make one myself. And so you'll notice the downward and upward arrows, which is really the part of all of these cycles that I really want you to be the most aware of. We're putting the green arrows in to show how it gets converted in the biotic environment, but the big thing that I want you to remember about all of the cycles are the red arrows and the blue arrows. So let's start with the oxygen cycle with what the red arrows, how does the oxygen get out of the abiotic environment and into the biotic environment? Well, oxygen gets taken out of the air in about 4 different ways. One way is by respiration. That's probably pretty intuitive to you because you know that we breathe and take in oxygen. But remember that respiration is not just breathing. Respiration includes any time that living cells take food energy and then break that down into energy that they can use, and that requires oxygen in order for that to happen. So you bring the oxygen into your body for that to happen through your breathing, but respiration just means that a cell is converting food into a type of energy that it can use. Respiration is the biggest way that oxygen is taken out of the abiotic environment. So you will also see that there are fires on there. Combustion requires oxygen. You know that if you're going to put out a fire, you tend to spray it with a fire extinguisher, which is just, it's carbon dioxide. And so you're smothering the fire by not allowing it to have any oxygen. You know that if you're trying to put out a fire, again, if you stop, drop, and roll, you roll yourself in a blanket so that you're smothering the fire so that it can't get to any oxygen and continue going. So combustion definitely, or any type of burning is definitely going to require oxygen. Ozone formation, when we talked about the greenhouse effect, we said that ozone is one of the greenhouse gases that helps reflect some of that energy from the sun back to the earth. The formula for ozone is O3, and so the oxygen that exists in the air is O2, where I always have two oxygen atoms hooked together. And so, again, it should make sense to you that if I'm going to form O3, I'm going to have to take some of this oxygen and break it, or start adding it together so that I can make O3. So ozone formation will take oxygen in the O2 form out of the air, and rusting also requires oxygen. Anytime you see any kind of metal that's rusting, rusting happens in nature as well with the different minerals that are found there. So all four of these things are going to be taking oxygen out of the air. And so all four of your downward arrows, that's what those are representing, is these four processes. Then I also have about 3 processes that are going to put oxygen back into the air. One of them is ozone destruction, so that would be the opposite of formation. So if I destroy the O3 molecule, part of what comes off of that could be an O2 molecule. I can also take water vapor and destroy it. Water vapor is going to be H2O. With 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. So if I break water vapor down into just hydrogen and oxygen, then that is going to form more oxygen. And then photosynthesis is the biggest source of putting oxygen back into the air again. And photosynthesis is going to happen not only on land, but again, it's also going to happen in the oceans because of the algae that are conducting photosynthesis out in the ocean. And so photosynthesis and respiration are going to be your 2 biggest players in the oxygen cycle. So I will show you here what this diagram should look like once you have it colored. If you want to write in, as I have, the ozone by the 2 arrows, one up and one down, and the water vapor by the other one so that you can remember what that's supposed to stand for, that might be a good idea. Okay, so there is the oxygen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is going to probably be the one that seems to be the most complicated. The biggest thing that I want you to remember again about the nitrogen cycle is how it gets out of the abiotic into the biotic and then how it goes back. And so your red and your blue arrows are what you need to concentrate on. So if you take the paper and mark the nitrogen cycle there, nitrogen fixation is actually arrow B in the diagram. So you're going to want to color that red. And nitrogen fixation is done by bacteria, and a lot of times those bacteria are located in root systems. Nitrogen fixation just means that they're taking N2, again, just like oxygen, the nitrogen that's in the air is always two atoms of nitrogen that are hooked together. And so the bacteria are going to take this N2 and they're actually going to convert it into ammonia. You may be familiar with the smell of ammonia, like in certain cleaners, especially in a cleaner like a window cleaner. A lot of times ammonia is used there. It has a very characteristic odor to it. Some people use ammonia when they do their laundry. It's not the same as bleach, it's different, but you may be familiar with the strong odor of ammonia. Then what happens is that some of these other arrows here, you can take this, the ammonia ion, and then convert that through, let's see, which arrow was it? Through arrow E in a process called ammonification. And then that ammonia can be turned into nitrates and nitrites, and then it's consumed by your plants, taken up in your plants and incorporated into their tissues, and then consumed by your consumers. And so we have a whole bunch of different arrows down in this area where this nitrogen is transferred from roots to plants to animals. And so again, this piece of this cycle is probably very confusing. It will remain confusing probably until you've had some chemistry. So I don't want you to be overly concerned about this part. Understand that we have to have bacteria to get the nitrogen into the cycle, and it also is going to take bacteria to get it back into the air as N2, and that is going to be arrow K, which is denitrification, again, done by bacteria. So we are very dependent on bacteria to get this nitrogen into a place where we can use it, and then to take it and get it back into the air again. Okay, so concentrate again on the red and the blue arrows in your nitrogen cycle. So I will show you what this finished diagram should look like. Really just one red arrow and one blue arrow to concentrate on, and both of those are very much dependent on bacteria. All right, the last cycle that we're going to be looking at today is the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is the only one that doesn't come out of the air. It actually is already present here on Earth, and it tends to be embedded in rock. And so as rock erodes, and then as the pieces run off and then they get dissolved in water, that's how it's going to transfer from the abiotic to the biotic system. So erosion, I believe is arrow A, and then the runoff is arrow H. And then just like you've seen in the other diagrams, all of the green arrows are going to be the consumption and the waste. And so this is all going to be arrows B, C, D, E, and F, which all represent the transfer from the plants to the consumers, to the waste, to the decay, and it's going to cycle its way through the biotic part of the system. And then your blue arrows are going to be I and J, and I and J are going to be the arrows that talk about how you've got the waste that then becomes sediment, and then how your sediment then goes back to rock again. If you remember learning in physical science about how sedimentary rock is formed, that's the part of the process that we're talking about right here. So I will show you this finished diagram. Again, you just have basically 2 red arrows and 1 blue arrow there for how the phosphorus gets into the biotic system, and then how it gets back out of the abiotic system. Okay, so you have those 3 cycles. I know that that's a lot of information. Tomorrow for one of your assignments, you are going to be taking this information and combining it down into a table so that it's a little easier for you to study and to remember. Hopefully the color coding and the diagram helped you understand the cycle, but then you're going to be summarizing that in a way so that you can learn it and try to remember it. Again, I know I mentioned it several times, but I want to make it really, really clear. The parts of these cycles that you need to be focusing on are the red arrows, where it's coming from the abiotic system to the biotic system, and then your blue arrows where it's going from the biotic back to the abiotic. So concentrate on those pieces.